Hi, it's Andria,
And Ian.
and we're here to review the Viking River Cruise called the Grand European Tour, which we took in September 2022, going from Amsterdam to Budapest. Ian, when was the first time you saw a Viking longboat, and what did you think?
We were actually on a canal cruise around Amsterdam, around the canals, and we came across this extremely long boat. I'd never seen one before. I didn't really have a concept of how long they were, but I thought, wow, that's a really, really long boat. And we only got to the end of it after about 15 hours, looked around the edge of it, and we could see it was a Viking boat.
15 hours?
Well, that's a slight exaggeration. That's a Wyman expression.
Okay, but our first impression, we're both sitting there going, our eyes were big. Oh my God, I didn't realize it was this large. Would you agree?
I agree. It was unbelievably long.
Yes. Now, on the top deck, they had chairs and tables, herb garden, a little golf thing. What actually happened on the top deck when we would go through the locks and low bridges?
Oh, they of course have to lower them down, otherwise you get your head whacked off, and you probably scraped off into the water, which is not really what you want.
No, but what amazed me was how flat everything goes, and it was literally maybe how big is that?
What, 6 inches off the floor?
Yeah, 6 inches off the floor.
Everything collapsed down really well. In fact, even the what I would call it the cockpit of the boat, the control tower, drops down into the floor of the boat.
Yes, and then he raises it up at different points so he can see what's going on around him, or he can just pop his head out to check that.
Yes, the control tower has actually got a hole on the roof, and he can just stick his head above it.
Yes. So, and then moving down to the next level is the lounge. Now that was where the port talks were, and one of the things I can say is the lounge doesn't seem to have enough chairs for everybody. So for port talks, I would always recommend people get there 5 or 10 minutes before, because if you're late, you miss the beginning of it, but also you may not find an optimum place to sit. Would you agree with that, Ian?
No, yeah. I mean, I didn't notice that as much.
Okay, not into the detail ever, are you?
No.
And I was always saying, come on, let's go, we need to get a seat.
And I'm happy to stand.
And he's happy to stand. Okay, so, and that lounge was quite comfortable. They had a bar there, so they would, while the port talk was going on, if you wanted to buy drinks, or if you had bought a drinks package, you could get drinks. And it was very comfortable to sit there during the day also and watch the scenery, which we did a few times. Moving down one level to the middle deck, that's where our cabin was. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But first, let's talk about the restaurant. Now, Ian, you are gluten-free.
Yes.
So how did they treat you as a gluten-free
Like
celiac?
a king. Like a king, like I deserve to be treated.
Oh, and do I fall short?
Sometimes.
But what actually, take us through what they would do for you.
No, it's very good. They would mark out a menu. They'd give you the menu previously, and I'd circle what I could have or what I wanted. And if there was something that they couldn't make gluten-free, they would let me know, and I'd just choose something else. But most of the time, I could either choose something that was gluten-free, or they would modify it to make it gluten-free, which was really easy.
Yes, and you got a menu, so you got breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There were plenty of seats in the restaurant, so there was never a problem with that. You did end up sitting with other people all the time because there were no seats for two, and that was really good because we met lots of people, and we're quite introverted, so a lot of times on cruises we don't meet people, but this one we did meet quite a lot. And the food would always have a regional selection, so they were trying to cook German food in Germany, Austrian food in Austria and such, so they would have starter, main, and dessert from the region, and then they would have a selection of other food. Breakfast was a bit of a buffet and quite a wide selection of food again. And one of the good things was egg of the day. So you could always ask what egg of the day was, and they would have different egg dishes. Anything else you want to say about the food?
No, there's more food there than you can ever eat.
Yes, and then everyone got free wine at lunch and dinner,
Yes.
and that was quite nice. There was only one wine, which was a choice. They just gave you red or white according to your choice, and it did mean that you were choosing and looking at quite a lot of other types of wines that you may not normally drink. Would you agree with that?
And the wines are excellent. No problem at all.
Okay, let's move into our cabin. Our room was quite comfortable. I wouldn't have any complaints about it. Did you have any, Anne?
No, that's good.
What I did love was the bathroom had a heated floor. And since we were traveling in September and early October, it was really nice to have your little tootsies on the heated floor, particularly when you came out of the shower.
The mirrors are also heated as well. So if you have a shower, you can actually see yourself to shave in the mirror without having to get all the steam off.
And if you wanted to do any hand washing of smalls or anything, you could hand wash them in the sink and then put them on. They had a line that you could pull across, or you could lie them just on the floor when it was heated and they would dry. Would you agree with that, Anne?
Yeah, I proved that concept.
Quite a few times, I believe. Okay, moving on to the excursions that we went on. We did all of the included excursions except for the one in Nuremberg where we paid for a special one. I particularly liked the voice system that they had.
Yes, the person leading the tour has a little transmitter. Each of the guests have a little receiver which they typically hang around their neck and a little earpiece that clicks into it. So you could be up to 50 meters or more, even 75 meters away from the tour leader and still hear them quite clearly. If it started to crackle a little bit, that gave you an indication that you were drifting too far behind or too far ahead and needed to slow down or catch up, or at least find where they were going, because if they got too far ahead, if they ducked around a corner with a little lollipop thing, you could find yourself lost.
Yes, and you kept the receiver and earphone that you had the whole trip and you brought it back to your room, and it was quite important to remember to charge it in its container because otherwise it could be flat the next day. The excursions were a lot of times in the morning, but sometimes in the afternoon, and they were local guides who took you around and told you the history, gave you a lot of local information, would paint a picture of that town both in the past and in today. Anything else you want to say about the excursions?
No, they're all very good value for money. It's not as though they were giving away, because they were free, they were just cheapies. They were excellent, and I find the guides, that they were locals, they were very proud and very passionate about the town that they lived in and their own country, and gave a lot of insight into, because how other people live as well. We got a much better idea of how people live, certainly from some of the guides. Because they meet people from all over the world, they get an insight into how other people live, and everybody watches television. So it was interesting, and there was lots of advantages, and you can see in the way they live and the way you compare that to how we live at home, and you think, well, that's a smart idea. We should do the same at home.
So it was really, really good. Generally, the boat pulled up into the middle of the town and you walked off the boat and the guide was there. Sometimes you were parked a little bit further away and you might take a bus to the town. So there were a few occasions of that, particularly in larger towns like Cologne. You were parked in Cologne, but you did take a bus to where the tour started. So there were a variety of different systems. Most were in the morning, but some were in the afternoon. Also during the cruise director would talk us through particularly scenic areas. So there's one particular part of where there are lots of castles on the left and the right, and she was an Australian, Aussie, and named Sherry.
Cherie.
And she gave excellent guidance and told us about each of the castles and the history of the castle. And a few times this guided way as you went through was really, really good. Moving on to the port talks were essential to attend because that gave you all the information you needed for the next day. One of the tips they gave us was to photograph where the town, in the daily guide, photograph on your camera where the boat was going to be, so that if you did get lost or separated or you went for your own walkabout, you could come back and at least give someone some information to get you back to the boat or how to contact the boat if you needed.
Sure, I think it had the phone number of the boat as well.
Yes.
But it also had the address in their local language and street that the taxi driver could understand, where we may not.
Yes, and what was also good, we took umbrellas because September, October is a rainy season, and we'll talk about the weather here. We didn't need to because there's a large number of umbrellas on the board, and they're the large golf type umbrellas, and they were always
on the boat.
On what did I say?
Board.
On board the boat.
Oh, on board, right? Yes.
Yes, and they were sitting by the exit door, so you could always grab one of those, and if you thought it was going to rain. The weather was a little bit drizzly from time to time, but it was not necessarily too cold or miserable, and even though a couple of times, or maybe 3 or 4 times, it did rain a bit, it was never heavy rain or anything. Would you agree?
Yeah, it was all good. I think, I can't remember, a couple of times you had a couple of sprinkles, but nothing that really stopped you or soaked you, so I think we were very lucky.
Let's talk about staff for a moment. So I mentioned before Sherry, the tour guide or tour director. She was excellent. The other person I'll call out was excellent was Martin from Holland. And if you ever get him, you know you have him because he's 6'7" and his head almost scrapes the ceiling in the boat. And he was very, very helpful with everything. The restaurant staff, particularly because Ian's gluten-free, within a day or two, as soon as Ian came in for breakfast, they'd bring his menu up. They'd always make sure he was quite well accommodated. They would have chats with us. They were very helpful.
Yeah, staff were excellent.
Any bad things you thought of, Ian?
Oh, it came to an end too soon.
Came to an end too soon? Yes, I would agree. And what about the Wi-Fi?
Wi-Fi, in a word, sucked.
Yes.
And on the boat it was fine, like you go anywhere else on the boat, but it was something I'm sure it was particular to our specific cabin. I could actually get Wi-Fi to work if I stood in the closet. I could get an update for a couple of pages, then go down and read those, and then go and stand in the closet.
And because I'm short, I couldn't stand in the closet tall enough to get mine to download.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was something just to our room. And I did raise it with them, and they said they reported. But outside in the lounge room area or up in the computer area or anywhere else on the boat,
yeah, it worked fine.
It was fine. And what was nice, that we could both have it. It was both free for both of us. So Andria could be watching something on YouTube and I could be watching something different.
You rate the cruise. Out of 5 points, what would you give the Viking River Cruise?
4.9.
4.9? I'd give it 5 out of 5. So I overrule you, obviously. I thought it was excellent.
What's there any question to that?
Would you do another river cruise with Viking?
Sure. Yeah.
We probably wouldn't do exactly the same one, but we would do other river cruises. We just found it really excellent, very relaxing.